This locavore movement is so interested in knowing the handling of their food and knowing what's in their food.
It's easy when you don't see where the animal comes from, where your meat is wrapped in plastic. You don't see where that chicken came from. You don't see where that beef came from. These people are connected to where their food comes from.
There's a legitimate food source associated with going out and trapping beavers. It's a lot of work, but it's not that much work for the amount of meat that you get off of it.
One of my son's favorite things to do is to trap beaver. Why? And there's no bloodthirst there. He wants to make beaver stew. He has an appreciation and a respect for the fact that we took that animal's life for a reason.
There's a lot to be said for being able to go out and connect with where your food is actually coming from.
If you ask my kids where their food comes from, my son will tell you that pond right there. You ask some of his friends, they're gonna be like, well, the grocery store.
I know where my friend harvested this beaver. I know the water's there. I've fished in the waters downstream.
Beaver makes up about 50% of our red meat consumption in our household, and we rely on that. We have not bought red meat from a grocery store in, this will be our 10th year.
Historically, generations ago, that's how people lived in Vermont. They got their deer in the fall, they might have gotten their black bear, they trapped for their Christmas money or even just to live.
Now it seems like everything's so accessible that we forgot where we came from.
A lot of people won't eat wild game because they don't agree with it, but yeah, they do go to the store and buy a ribeye or buy a T-bone steak.
If you are eating a steak, you really ought to know what went into doing that.
There's a legitimate reason to utilize these animals, and as long as it's sustainable, there's no reason not to.
This beaver, probably gonna be about 45 pounds, will yield Riley and I 9 meals of food, and it'll yield Joey about another 20. Joey eats half a cup of raw beaver meat in the morning and at night, every day of the year, 365.
Raw beaver meat all the time. I mean, that's what keeps him healthy and just beautiful looking.
We can't afford groceries. I'm living paycheck to paycheck, and I see no end to that in sight. Once we become more effective trappers, I'd love to catch 50 beavers through the ice and have all that food, through the year.
To be able to go out, find your own food, prepare it, feed it to your family, and know you don't have to go to the grocery store and buy it off a shelf, where you don't know where it came from, and you don't know what kind of antibiotics are in it. That must be the most inspiring thing that you can do.
I personally don't generally rely on the grocery store for most of my food. I grow a lot of my own food. To be able to set traps and feel confident enough that I could go provide for my family is a whole nother level.
That is a beaver backstrap, and that is a beaver sirloin. I believe that right there is the best cut of meat that exists in our woods.
My family, that's the majority of the meat we eat is wild game.
Today, I've got some beaver backstraps. We're gonna grind them up into meatballs.
I can't remember how many times as a kid I've eaten beaver in a stew or in spaghetti or anything like that.
It's a softer meat, which is interesting. I think it makes it an ideal candidate for grinding it and making into meatballs and meatloaves or something like that. I know exactly what's going in it. I know exactly where this is coming from. It feels more real to me here. And I think food should be real. I try to use as much of that animal as possible. If any part of it goes to waste, I think it's wrong.
If we don't consume the meat, our dog does. If we don't feel that it's fit for our dog, then we give it back to Mother Nature. And Mother Nature is glad to take beavers back, the bobcats, the fisher, the coyotes.
Love it.
And it's just a matter of how much we're utilizing for ourselves and how much we're giving back to Mother Nature.
Does our beaver meatball get a little bit of sauce on there? It's just super tender. And the flavor is really great too.
My wife and I and my kids, we have actually started eating bobcats. Bobcat is actually delicious. The hindquarters of bobcats, the back straps. If my 25-year-old daughter will eat bobcat meat, then you know it's good.
In my younger days, I lived with a trapper. He would trap muskrats. We would eat them. To be honest, I had to have a beer or two before I tried it, but I said this as well, this is really good.